Marcus Chen never expected his life to change when he signed up for the Galactic Peace. Of course, the job description mentioned cultural exchange and diplomatic relations, but nobody warned him about becoming a father to 3 alien children or earning the deadly hatred of an entire royal bloodline. The trouble started on Zerion Prime, a world where crystalline spires reached toward twin suns and the air hummed with energy that made human skin tingle. Marcus had been stationed there for 6 months, working as a liaison between the human embassy and the local Zerathi government. The Zerathi were tall, elegant beings with skin that shifted colors based on their emotions and large, luminous eyes that seemed to see straight through deception. That morning began like any other. Marcus was reviewing trade agreements in his cramped office when the emergency beacon screamed through the embassy's communication system. The message was brief but terrifying. A Zerathi royal transport had crashed in the Crimson Wastes, the planet's most dangerous desert region. 3 young princesses were missing, presumed dead. What made this crisis worse was the political situation. Queen Vexera, the ruler of the Zerathi Empire, was already suspicious of human intentions in their space. Her daughter's deaths would certainly be blamed on human sabotage regardless of evidence. War seemed inevitable. Marcus volunteered for the rescue mission despite having no military training. Something about the situation felt wrong to him. The Zerathi were master pilots and their ships were nearly indestructible. A simple crash didn't make sense. The rescue team consisted of 5 humans and 2 Zerathi guides. They flew out in a reinforced transport, scanning the endless red dunes for any sign of wreckage. The Crimson Wastes earned their name from the iron-rich sand that stretched for thousands of miles, broken only by jagged rock formations and thermal vents that could melt steel. After 8 hours of searching, they found the crashed ship half buried in a canyon. The royal transport was magnificent even in ruin, its biometal hull still pulsing with faint life signs. But something was clearly wrong with the crash site. The impact pattern suggested the ship hadn't simply fallen from the sky. It had been forced down. Marcus was the first to notice the energy scarring on nearby rocks, the telltale signs of weapon fire. This wasn't an accident, he announced to the team. Someone shot them down. Inside the wreckage, they found evidence of a struggle but no bodies. The ship's emergency systems had deployed personal force fields around 3 small chambers, suggesting the princesses had survived the initial crash. Tracker readings showed 3 sets of small footprints leading away from the ship toward a series of caves. The Zerathi guides refused to go further. They claimed the caves were cursed, home to ancient creatures that fed on consciousness itself. The human team leader wanted to call for reinforcements, but Marcus knew they didn't have time. Each hour of delay increased the chance that the princesses would die from exposure or predators. Against direct orders, Marcus took emergency supplies and headed into the cave system alone. The tunnels were unlike anything he'd seen before. Walls that seemed to breathe and passages that twisted in ways that hurt his brain to follow. Strange whispers echoed from the depths, speaking in languages that predated civilization. He found them 3 hours later in a cavern lit by phosphorescent fungi. 3 small figures huddled together in the center of the space, their skin pale with fear and exhaustion. The eldest looked perhaps 12 in human years, with the characteristic pointed ears and shifting skin tones of her species. The middle child appeared to be around 8, while the youngest couldn't have been more than 5. When they saw Marcus approach, the eldest stepped protectively in front of her sisters, her skin flashing warning colors. "Stay back, human," she demanded in accented standard. "We know your kind cannot be trusted." Marcus slowly placed his supplies on the ground and stepped back, hands visible. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said softly. "I'm here to take you home to your mother." "Liar," the middle child spat. "Humans killed our guards and shot down our ship." "We saw the energy signatures." This revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. If humans really had attacked the royal transport, it meant there were traitors within the embassy or worse. The attack had been officially sanctioned. Either way, these 3 children were now in mortal danger, and not just from the environment. The youngest princess, who had remained silent, suddenly collapsed. Her skin had turned an alarming shade of gray and her breathing was shallow. The eldest child's anger transformed into panic as she knelt beside her sister. "Siri is sick," she whispered. "The cave spores. They're poisonous to our kind. She needs medical treatment now." Marcus didn't hesitate. He activated his emergency beacon, calling for immediate medical evacuation, then approached the dying child. His basic first aid training was useless here. He knew nothing about Zerathi physiology. But he could see that the little girl was suffering, and every human instinct told him to help. He gently lifted Ziri into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. Her skin was burning with fever, and strange patterns of discoloration spread across her face. The other two sisters watched with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as Marcus began carrying their sister toward the cave entrance. "What are your names?" he asked as they walked, trying to keep the children focused and moving. "I am Princess Lyra-san," the eldest replied formally. "This is Nixada, and the little one you carry is Ziri Mel. We are the daughters of Queen Vexera, Empress of the Outer Systems." The weight of that statement settled on Marcus like lead. These weren't just any Zerathi children. They were heirs to one of the most powerful empires in known space. Their mother commanded fleets that could glass entire worlds, and she was known for her fierce protection of her offspring. As they emerged from the caves, Marcus could see the rescue shuttles approaching in the distance. But he also noticed something else: energy signatures on his scanner that didn't belong to the human rescue team. Someone else was coming, and their intentions were clearly hostile. The real danger was just beginning, and Marcus realized that saving these three children might cost him everything he had ever known about right and wrong: loyalty and betrayal, and the true meaning of family across the stars. The hostile ships arrived before the rescue team could land. 3 sleek fighters with human military markings descended from the clouded sky, their weapons already charging with deadly energy. Marcus pressed himself and the 3 princesses against the cave entrance as pulse fire scorched the sand around them. "Those are human ships," Lyra-san observed with cold fury in her voice. "Your people truly mean to murder us all." Marcus felt sick as he recognized the attack formation. These weren't rogue elements or pirates using stolen ships. This was an official military strike team, probably sent to eliminate all witnesses to the original attack. The rescue had been a trap from the beginning. His communicator crackled with an incoming transmission. "Marcus Chen, you are ordered to step away from the alien targets. Your interference in this operation constitutes treason against humanity." The voice belonged to Colonel Bradford, his direct superior at the embassy. Marcus had suspected the man was corrupt, but this level of betrayal went beyond personal greed. Someone high in the human government wanted these children dead badly enough to risk interstellar war. "Negative control," Marcus replied, surprising himself with his calm tone. "I'm bringing 3 injured civilians back for medical treatment. Stand down your weapons." Bradford's laughter was cold and mechanical. "Those aren't civilians, Chen. They're enemy combatants who will grow up to lead fleets against human space. The board of directors has decided that preventing future wars justifies present action." The board of directors. Marcus now understood the scope of the conspiracy. The Terran corporate consortium had been pushing for aggressive expansion into Zerathi space for years, blocked only by existing treaties. With the royal heirs dead, Queen Vexera would have no choice but to respond with force, giving the consortium the excuse they needed for full-scale invasion. Little Ziri's condition was worsening. Her breathing had become irregular, and the gray discoloration was spreading across her skin. Marcus made a decision that would change the course of his entire life. "Lyra, Nix, can you run?" he asked quietly. The 2 sisters nodded, though fear made their skin flash through rapid color changes. Marcus adjusted his grip on Ziri and began moving toward a rocky outcropping that would provide some cover. "Where can we go?" Nixada whispered. "The human ships control the sky." Marcus pulled out his emergency transponder and made a modification that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. Instead of broadcasting a human distress signal, he began transmitting on Zerathi military frequencies. "This is human liaison Marcus Chen calling any Zerathi forces. I have Princess Lyra-san, Princess Nixada, and Princess Zirimel in my custody. The children are under attack by human military forces, requesting immediate assistance." The response was almost instantaneous. Queen Vexara's voice cut through space with the force of a plasma lance. "Human, if this is some kind of trap, I will personally tear your species from existence star by star." "No trap, Your Majesty. Your daughters are alive, but in danger. I'm transmitting our coordinates now. Above them, the human fighters had noticed their movement and began strafing runs across the rocky terrain. Marcus dove behind a boulder, shielding Ziri with his body as superheated stone fragments rained down around them. Lyra-san looked at him with something approaching respect for the first time. Why are you helping us? Your own kind wants us dead. Marcus thought about his answer as he checked Ziri's pulse. It was weak but steady. Because you're children, and children shouldn't pay for the crimes adults plan in their names. The truth was more complex than that, but Marcus didn't have words for the rage he felt at his own species. Humanity had spent centuries claiming moral superiority over other races, preaching about justice and civilization while secretly planning genocide. These three scared children represented everything humans claimed to protect, yet his own people were trying to murder them. Nixata tugged at his sleeve. Marcus, Ziri is saying something. The youngest princess was barely conscious, but her lips were moving. Marcus leaned close to hear her whispered words. Don't let them hurt Lyra and Nyx. Promise me. I promise, Marcus said, and meant it completely. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, but these were different from the human fighters. Zarathi ships moved through atmosphere with a distinctive harmonic resonance, like singing crystals given flight. Marcus felt a surge of hope as three royal interceptors crested the canyon walls, their biometal hulls gleaming with embedded weapons. The human pilots immediately changed tactics, abandoning their attack on the ground targets to engage the new arrivals. What followed was a demonstration of why the Zarathi Empire had never lost a space battle in recorded history. Zarathi pilots didn't just fly their ships. They merged consciousness with the biomechanical craft, creating a hybrid entity that moved with impossible grace and struck with surgical precision. Within minutes, two of the human fighters were burning wreckage scattered across the desert floor. The third fled toward space, transmitting emergency signals. A Zarathi medical team landed near Marcus's position, while the interceptors maintained defensive patterns overhead. The lead medic was a tall female with intricate scarification covering her arms, marks that indicated advanced healing abilities. Step away from the princess's human, she commanded, but without the hostility Marcus had expected. The youngest needs immediate treatment, he said, carefully placing Ziri on a medical stretcher that adjusted itself to her body shape. Cave spore poisoning, I think. The medic ran scanning devices over Ziri's unconscious form, her skin shifting through diagnostic colors. You kept her alive, she said with obvious surprise. Most beings would have panicked and made her condition worse. Lyra-san stepped forward, her natural authority asserting itself despite her young age. This human protected us from his own kind. He deserves our consideration. The medic looked between Marcus and the princesses, clearly struggling with conflicting loyalties. Finally, she activated her communicator. Your Majesty, the children are secure, the human. He appears to have acted honorably. Queen Vexara's response was immediate. Bring them all to the flagship. I want to speak with this human personally. As the medical team prepared the princesses for transport, Nixata grabbed Marcus's hand. You're coming with us, right? You promised to protect us. Marcus looked up at the Zarathi ships waiting to take them aboard. Crossing that threshold would make him a traitor in human eyes, but staying would likely mean death for all of them. Colonel Bradford wouldn't let witnesses survive to expose the conspiracy. Yes, he said simply. I'm coming with you. The medical transport lifted off smoothly, carrying them toward the massive Zarathi dreadnought that hung in orbit like a crystalline mountain. Marcus watched his old life disappear below them, wondering if he'd just saved 3 children or doomed 2 entire civilizations to war. Either way, there was no turning back now. He was committed to protecting Lyra, Nyx, and Ziri, whatever the cost to himself or his species. Some promises, he realized, were more important than loyalty to governments that had forgotten what honor meant. The Zarathi flagship was like nothing Marcus had ever seen. Living corridors pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, walls that breathed with the ship's life systems, and gravity that adjusted automatically to each individual's needs. Royal guards with ceremonial weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds flanked their path to the throne room. Queen Vexara was waiting for them in a chamber that defied physics, where waterfalls float upward and stars seem to shine through transparent walls. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her skin a deep purple that shifted to golden bronze as she saw her daughters approaching. Her eyes, large and multifaceted like precious gems, fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Mama. Ziri had recovered enough to run to her mother, though she still moved unsteadily. The queen knelt to embrace all 3 of her daughters, her skin cycling through colors that Marcus had never seen before, emotions too complex for human understanding. My children, she whispered in her native language, then switched to standard as she looked at Marcus. Human approach. Marcus walked forward until he stood within arm's reach of the most powerful being in known space. Up close he could see the intricate patterns of scarification that covered her neck and hands, each mark representing a world brought into the Empire or an enemy defeated in personal combat. Your name is Marcus Chen, she said. It wasn't a question. My intelligence reports indicate you were supposed to die on that planet with my daughters. Yes, Your Majesty. Yet you chose to protect them instead of following your orders. Why? Marcus had been thinking about this question since they left Zarian Prime. Because they're children who were in danger. Nothing else mattered. Queen Vexara studied him for a long moment. My advisors tell me this was all an elaborate human trap, that you helped plan the attack and are now playing the role of rescuer to gain my trust. Your advisors are wrong, Your Majesty, but I understand why you would think that. Prove it, she commanded. Marcus activated his personal data pad and began transferring files. These are encrypted communications between Colonel Bradford and the Terran Corporate Consortium. I've been investigating suspicious activities at the embassy for months. The attack on your daughters was meant to provoke you into declaring war, giving the consortium legal justification for military action against your empire. The Queen's skin shifted to a dangerous shade of red as she reviewed the data. Marcus could hear her breathing become controlled the way predators breathe just before they strike. These communications implicate your entire diplomatic mission, she said finally. Most of it, yes. I estimate maybe a dozen humans on Zarion Prime weren't part of the conspiracy. The rest were either active participants or willfully blind to what was happening. Lyra-san stepped forward, her young voice carrying surprising authority. Mother, Marcus saved our lives when he could have let us die. He broadcast on our military frequencies to call for help. He put his body between us and the weapons of his own people. He promised to protect us, Ziri added, still clinging to her mother's robes. And he kept his promise. Queen Vexara looked down at her youngest daughter, then back at Marcus. Do you understand what your actions have done? By betraying your own species to protect mine, you have created a diplomatic impossibility. I cannot return you to human space without guaranteeing your execution. Nor can I keep you here without appearing to hold a hostage. Marcus hadn't thought about his own situation until now. In the rush to save the princesses, he had effectively made himself stateless. Humanity would brand him a traitor, while the Zarathi had no reason to trust him. I understand, Your Majesty. I accept the consequences of my choices. Do you? Her voice carried a note of amusement. I think you understand very little, Marcus Chen. But my daughters seem to have adopted you as their protector, which creates complications. Nixada moved to stand beside Marcus, her skin bright with determination. He's not our protector. He's our friend. Our family. The word family hit the throne room like a shockwave. Marcus saw the Queen's advisors exchange alarmed looks, while the royal guards tensed as if expecting an attack. In Zarathi culture, apparently, claiming family bonds with an alien was either sacred or blasphemous, he couldn't tell which. Nixada, you cannot simply declare, the Queen began. Yes. I can, the middle princess interrupted. The right of adoption allows any member of the royal family to claim kinship with one who has shown absolute loyalty. Marcus proved his loyalty when he chose us over his own species. Marcus felt completely lost. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what's happening. Queen Vexara's skin shifted through several colors before settling on an amused golden hue. My daughter has just invoked an ancient law that makes you legally part of the royal family. If I accept her claim, you become my adopted son and a prince of the Zarathi Empire. And if you don't accept it, then I must explain to the Royal Council why I rejected a family claim made in good faith by my own children. The Queen's expression suggested this would be extremely difficult. The political ramifications would be significant. Lyra-san joined her sisters. We invoke the right together. 3 voices speaking as one. Marcus Chen showed us kindness when his own people showed only hatred. He risked his life for strangers. He kept faith when faithlessness would have been easier. By law and tradition, we claim him as blood of our blood. The formal phrasing seemed to activate something in the room's systems. Lights pulsed in rhythm with the princess's words, and Marcus felt a strange resonance in his bones, as if the ship itself was bearing witness to the ceremony. Queen Vexara was silent for a long time, her skin cycling through colors too rapidly for Marcus to interpret. Finally, she spoke. The right of adoption has been invoked by 3 royal voices. Marcus Chen, do you accept the bonds of family offered by my daughters? Marcus looked at the 3 children who had somehow become the most important people in his universe. Lyra with her fierce intelligence and protective instincts, Nyx with her quick wit and stubborn courage, little Ziri with her gentle spirit and trusting heart. They were offering him something he had never expected to find among the stars, a place to belong. I accept, he said simply. The queen nodded slowly. Then let it be recorded in the archives of the Empire. Marcus Chen, human-born, is now Prince Marcus of House Vexara, sworn protector of the royal line, and my adopted son. Power flowed through the room like electricity, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his relationship with these people. They were no longer aliens he was helping. They were his family, bound by laws and traditions older than human civilization. Welcome to the family, brother, Lyra said with a smile that showed entirely too many sharp teeth. Marcus smiled back, realizing that his real adventure was just beginning. Being an alien prince was probably going to be complicated, especially when both humans and Zerathi had powerful reasons to want him dead. 3 months after the adoption ceremony, Marcus was beginning to understand why Queen Vexara had called his situation complicated. The Zerathi Royal Council was split between those who saw him as a useful diplomatic asset and those who considered his presence an insult to their ancient bloodlines. Meanwhile, his 3 adopted sisters had appointed themselves as his cultural instructors, which meant daily lessons that ranged from embarrassing to potentially fatal. You're holding the ceremonial blade wrong again, Lyra-san corrected as Marcus struggled through his morning combat training. At 14 human years equivalent, she was already a master of 12 different fighting styles and had the patience of a drill sergeant. The edge should sing when you move it, listen. Her practice sword cut through the air with a musical tone that made Marcus's teeth ache. His own attempt sounded like a rusty gate opening. Maybe humans just aren't musical enough for Zerathi weapons, he suggested. Nonsense, Nyx called from her position hanging upside down from the training room ceiling. She was practicing what the Zerathi called dimensional awareness, learning to fight in zero gravity or variable gravity fields. You're just thinking like a human instead of feeling like family. That was the core of Marcus's problem. Despite the formal adoption, despite the genuine affection he felt for his sisters, he was still fundamentally human trying to function in an alien society. The Zerathi operated on principles of empathic resonance, emotional harmony, and psychic connection that humans simply didn't possess. Perhaps we should focus on his diplomatic training instead, suggested Zirimel. The youngest princess had recovered fully from her cave spore poisoning and appointed herself as Marcus's advisor on royal protocol. The Andorian delegation arrives tomorrow and Marcus needs to understand the greeting rituals, Marcus groaned. Andorian greeting rituals involved something called essence sharing that made human handshakes look primitive. The visiting aliens literally exchanged small portions of their life energy as a sign of trust and respect. Can I just bow and say hello? He asked. Not if you want them to take you seriously as a royal prince, Lyra replied. The Andorians are our strongest allies, but they're also incredibly formal. One mistake in protocol could be interpreted as an insult to their entire species. Queen Vexara entered the training room with her usual silent grace. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had learned to read her emotional states through the subtle color shifts in her skin. Today she was displaying the deep blue patterns that indicated serious concern. Children, I need to speak with Marcus privately. The 3 princesses exchanged glances and reluctantly left the room. Marcus had noticed they'd become even more protective of him since the adoption, as if they were afraid someone might try to take their new brother away. What's wrong? Marcus asked as soon as they were alone. The situation with your former government has escalated, the queen replied. The Terran Corporate Consortium has issued a formal demand for your extradition, claiming you kidnapped my daughters and stole state secrets. Marcus felt cold anger rising in his chest. They're the ones who tried to murder children. Yes, but they control the narrative now. According to their official reports, you sabotaged the royal transport and orchestrated the entire crisis to gain access to Zarathi military secrets. They've even produced fabricated evidence showing you receiving payments from our intelligence services. Will you turn me over to them? Queen Vexara's skin shifted to the warm gold that indicated amusement. Marcus, you are my son now. I would sooner hand over my own crown than surrender you to humans who want you dead. But this situation threatens the peace between our peoples. What kind of threat? The consortium is pressuring the Human Federation to declare the Zarathi Empire a hostile power. They claim we're harboring terrorists and planning aggressive expansion into human space. Several Federation worlds have already begun mobilizing their fleets. Marcus sat down heavily on a training bench. His decision to save 3 children had somehow escalated into a potential interstellar war. What can we do? That depends partly on you, the Queen replied. The consortium's claims about your motivations won't stand up to detailed investigation, but only if you're willing to testify before a neutral tribunal. The problem is that such testimony would require you to reveal details about your adoption and your current status in our empire. What's the problem with that? Queen Vexara's expression became carefully neutral. Marcus, you are not just an adopted prince. The rite of adoption performed by my daughters made you a legal heir to the Zarathi throne. If something happens to me and my daughters, you would become Emperor of the Outer Systems. The implications hit Marcus like a shuttle crash, a human heir to the most powerful alien empire in known space. The political ramifications were staggering. The consortium doesn't know this yet, the Queen continued. But they will learn eventually. When they do, they'll see you as the ultimate prize, a way to potentially control the Zarathi Empire from within. Then we can't let them find out. It may be too late for that. My intelligence services report that human agents have been asking very specific questions about Zarathi inheritance laws and adoption rituals. They're getting close to the truth. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The Queen's skin immediately shifted to battle colors, deep red with silver highlights that indicated extreme alertness. Lyra-san's voice came through the communication system. Mother, we have incoming ships. Human military flying consortium flags. They're demanding permission to board. The Queen and Marcus rushed to the bridge where the 3 princesses were already at battle stations. On the main viewer, Marcus could see a human dreadnought flanked by 6 destroyers. The ships bore the corporate symbols of the Terran Consortium, but their weapons were military-grade and obviously ready for action. Open communications, Queen Vexara commanded. The face that appeared on screen belonged to Admiral Harrison, a man Marcus recognized from embassy briefings. The Admiral's expression was cold and determined. Your Majesty, I am authorized by the Terran Corporate Board to demand the immediate surrender of the fugitive Marcus Chen. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will consider this an act of war against humanity. Queen Vexara's skin shifted to colors Marcus had never seen before, patterns that seemed to writhe with barely contained fury. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the ship's hull resonate. Admiral Harrison, you are threatening the royal family of the Zarathi Empire while trespassing in our sovereign space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. We know the truth about Chen, Your Majesty. We know what he really is to you now. Surrender him peacefully and we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Marcus realized that his worst fears had come true. Somehow, the consortium had learned about his status as a potential heir to the Zarathi throne. Well, Nixata said cheerfully, this is definitely more interesting than protocol lessons. Ziri moved to stand beside Marcus, taking his hand in hers. Don't worry, brother. We won't let them take you. Lyra-san was already working at the tactical station. Mother, our escort fleet can be here in 6 hours. Can we hold them off that long? Queen Vexara looked at Marcus with something approaching pride. My son, you seem to have a talent for making enemies in high places. Marcus squeezed Ziri's hand and looked out at the human ships preparing for battle. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. No, the Queen replied firmly. You did what was right. And now we deal with the consequences together. That's what families do. As battle stations sounded throughout the ship, Marcus realized that his journey from human diplomat to alien prince was about to face its ultimate test. The next few hours would determine not just his own fate, but the future relationship between two of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The standoff lasted for 37 minutes before Admiral Harrison made his first mistake. Instead of waiting for the Queen's answer, he launched a single torpedo as a warning shot toward the Zarathi flagship's starboard hull. The weapon never reached its target. Lyra-san had been waiting at the tactical station with the patience of a born predator. The moment the torpedo launched, her fingers danced across biomechanical controls that responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. The flagship's defensive systems came alive with surgical precision, intercepting the torpedo with a pulse beam that left nothing but glittering debris. Admiral Harrison has just committed an act of war against the Zarathi Empire, Queen Vexara announced calmly. All ships, you are authorized to defend yourselves with extreme prejudice. Marcus watched in amazement as the Zarathi flagship transformed from a peaceful diplomatic vessel into something that belonged in nightmares. Biomechanical weapon pods extended from the hull like flowering death, while the ship's crystalline superstructure began resonating with energy that made space itself seem to bend. Marcus, get to the emergency bridge, the Queen commanded. This is going to be intense. I'm not leaving my family, he replied firmly. Queen Vexara's skin flashed with surprised approval, while his three sisters grinned with unmistakable pride. Very well, but stay clear of the tactical stations. What followed was a demonstration of why the Zarathi Empire had never lost a space battle. The human ships outnumbered the single flagship 7-1, mounted weapons that could crack a planet's crust, and had tactical advantages that should have guaranteed victory. None of it mattered. Zarathi combat doctrine was based on the principle of harmonic warfare, using the natural resonance frequencies of matter itself as a weapon. Their ships didn't just fire energy beams. They convinced the target's own molecules to vibrate themselves apart. Human shields designed to deflect or absorb incoming attacks were useless against weapons that attacked from within. The first human destroyer simply came apart like a puzzle box being disassembled by invisible hands. The second managed to fire a full spread of missiles before its power systems convinced themselves to explode. The third tried to retreat but discovered that its faster-than-light drive now refused to function in the presence of Zarathi harmonic fields. Admiral Harrison's dreadnought lasted longer, but only because Queen Vexara was demonstrating restraint. She could have ended the battle in minutes, but chose instead to systematically disable the human ships while keeping casualties to a minimum. Why aren't you just destroying them? Marcus asked as another human destroyer drifted helplessly after its weapon systems shut themselves down. Because unnecessary death serves no purpose, the Queen replied, and because you are my son, and I will not force you to watch me slaughter your birth species without cause. The consideration in her voice made Marcus realize how completely his perspective had changed. 3 months ago, he would have been horrified at the idea of humans being defeated by aliens. Now he was proud of his adoptive mother's restraint and tactical brilliance. Nixeda looked up from her station with excitement. Marcus, you need to see this. The human ships are receiving new orders. The communication intercepts appeared on the main display, and Marcus felt sick as he read them. The Terran Corporate Consortium was authorizing the use of antimatter torpedoes against the Zarathi flagship, despite the presence of their own personnel in the area. They're willing to kill their own admiral to get to us, he said in disbelief. Not just the admiral, Lyra-san corrected grimly. Those antimatter torpedoes will sterilize everything in a 50-kilometer sphere. The blast will destroy several merchant vessels that happen to be in the area. Marcus looked at the tactical display and saw the innocent ships that would become collateral damage in the consortium's desperate gambit. Families, traders, scientists, people who had nothing to do with this conflict but would die because corporate executives wanted to eliminate a political threat. We have to warn them, he said. The merchant ships? Queen Vexara asked. They would never believe a warning from us. To them, we are the aggressors here. Marcus had an idea that probably violated a dozen laws and would certainly get him in trouble with both sides. What if the warning came from a human? Before anyone could stop him, Marcus activated the general communication array and broadcast on all frequencies. This is Prince Marcus Chen of the Zarathi Empire, calling all ships in the combat area. The Terran Corporate Consortium is about to deploy antimatter weapons. All civilian vessels must evacuate immediately. I repeat, antimatter weapons inbound. Get out of the area now. The effect was immediate and chaotic. The civilian ships, recognizing a human voice even if they didn't believe the title, began emergency jumps to faster than light speed. Several military vessels hesitated, confused by contradictory orders. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the chaos with rage and desperation. Chen, you traitorous bastard, you've doomed your own species. No, Marcus replied calmly. I've saved innocent lives, something you've apparently forgotten how to do. The antimatter torpedoes launched 60 seconds later, just as the last civilian ship jumped to safety. Queen Vexara made no attempt to intercept the weapons. Instead, the Zarathi flagship simply disappeared. The ship didn't jump to faster than light speed or activate conventional shields. It shifted into a dimensional phase that Marcus's human senses couldn't fully process. One moment, the flagship was a solid object in normal space. The next, it existed in a parallel reality where antimatter explosions were merely interesting light displays. Dimensional phasing, Ziri explained helpfully. It's one of our older technologies, but humans haven't figured out how to detect or counter it yet. Marcus watched the antimatter explosions bloom like deadly flowers in the space where they had been moments before. The energy release was powerful enough to sterilize a small moon, but it was striking empty vacuum instead of living beings. The Zarathi flagship phased back into normal space directly behind Admiral Harrison's dreadnought. Queen Vexara's voice was cold as winter when she opened communications. Admiral, you have just attempted to deploy weapons of mass destruction in civilian space. By the laws of interstellar warfare, you are now classified as a war criminal. Surrender immediately, or I will demonstrate why the Zarathi Empire has never shown mercy to those who target innocent lives. The human admiral's face appeared on screen, and Marcus was shocked by how much the man had aged in the past hour. Harrison looked beaten, desperate, and cornered. You don't understand, the admiral said. The consortium has my family. If I don't bring Chen back, they'll kill my wife and children. Please, I'm begging you. The revelation hit the bridge like a physical blow. Marcus felt his sister's shock through their empathic abilities, while Queen Vexara's skin shifted through colors of surprise and growing anger. Admiral Harrison, the Queen said carefully, are you telling me that the Terran Corporate Consortium is holding your family hostage to ensure your cooperation? Not just mine. They have leverage over half the officers in this fleet. Family members, friends, financial obligations. Anyone who refuses their orders faces consequences that go far beyond military discipline. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing the remaining human ships. He had assumed they were facing enemies, but they were actually looking at fellow victims of the same corporate conspiracy that had tried to murder his sisters. Your Majesty, Marcus said quietly, I think we've been fighting the wrong war. Queen Vexara's skin settled into the deep purple that indicated profound thought. When she spoke again, her voice carried new possibilities. Admiral Harrison, I am prepared to offer you and your personnel political asylum within the Zarathi Empire. In return, I want complete intelligence on the consortium's operations and the evidence needed to expose their crimes to the legitimate human government. And our families? Marcus stepped forward. We'll get them back, Admiral. All of them. That's a promise from one human to another. For the first time since the standoff began, Admiral Harrison smiled. You know, Chen, when this started, I thought you were the greatest traitor in human history. Now I'm beginning to think you might be the most human person I've ever met. As the human ships powered down their weapons and prepared to formally defect to the Zarathi Empire, Marcus realized that his family had just grown considerably larger. The war that the consortium had tried to start was about to become a revolution that would change both civilizations forever. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the balcony of the Zarathi Imperial Palace watching two suns set over the crystal spires of the capital city. The view never got old, but tonight he wasn't admiring the scenery. Tonight he was preparing for the most important speech of his life. Tomorrow, Representatives from 47 different species would gather for the signing of the new colonial accords, a treaty that would fundamentally reshape how civilizations interacted across known space. The Terran corporate consortium had been exposed, disbanded, and its leadership arrested for crimes against sentient beings. Admiral Harrison had kept his word, providing evidence that led to the liberation of thousands of hostages and the prosecution of war criminals throughout human space. But the real victory wasn't political, it was personal. Marcus had found his place in a universe that had seemed determined to make him an outsider. "Brother, you're brooding again," Nixata announced as she materialized beside him. At 15 equivalent years, she had mastered the Zerathi art of dimensional stepping and enjoyed using it to startle unsuspecting family members. "I'm not brooding, I'm contemplating. Same thing, different vocabulary. Lyra wants to see you in the strategy room. Something about your speech tomorrow." Marcus found his eldest sister surrounded by holographic displays showing troop positions, supply lines, and diplomatic protocols. Since the crisis with the consortium, Lyra had been appointed as the Empire's youngest strategic advisor, a position that suited her analytical mind perfectly. "The security briefing for tomorrow's ceremony," she announced without preamble. 17 different intelligence agencies have identified potential threats, ranging from consortium loyalists to religious extremists who think aliens and humans shouldn't cooperate. "How many of these threats are credible?" Marcus asked. "All of them," Zirimel replied from her position curled up in an energy chair. The youngest princess had become the family's unofficial expert on interspecies psychology, and her insights into motivation and behavior had proven invaluable. "The signing represents everything that extremist groups fear most: permanent cooperation between species that used to be enemies." Queen Vexara entered the room with her usual silent grace, but Marcus could see the stress patterns in her skin coloration. Leading an empire was challenging enough without adding revolution and interstellar diplomacy to the mix. "Children, I've received disturbing intelligence from our human allies," she announced. "Consortium remnants have formed a terrorist organization called the Human Purity Alliance. They're planning something for tomorrow's ceremony." Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "What kind of something?" "Unknown. But our sources indicate they see you as the symbol of everything they oppose. A human who chose aliens over his own species, who holds power in a non-human government, who represents the future they're trying to prevent. So they want to kill me." "That's not exactly news." "It's more complicated than that," Lyra said, manipulating her holographic displays. "Killing you would make you a martyr. Instead, intelligence suggests they want to capture you and put you on trial for treason against humanity. A public spectacle designed to humiliate both you and the Empire." Nixata laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. They clearly don't know Marcus very well. "He doesn't humiliate easily." "That's not the point," Queen Vexara replied. "The point is that tomorrow's ceremony represents hope for permanent peace between our peoples. If extremists disrupt it successfully, that hope could be destroyed for generations." Marcus looked at his family, the 3 sisters who had claimed him as brother, the adoptive mother who had given him a place to belong. Over the past year, they had become more important to him than his own life. The idea of his presence endangering the peace they had all worked to achieve was unbearable. "Maybe I shouldn't attend the ceremony," he said quietly. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. All 4 Zerathi royal family members spoke at once, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the room's crystal fixtures resonate. "Absolutely not. That's exactly what they want. You're being ridiculous. Over our dead bodies." Queen Vexara raised a hand for silence. "Marcus, you are not just my adopted son. You are a symbol of what's possible when beings choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over fear. Your presence at tomorrow's ceremony isn't optional, it's essential. But if something goes wrong, then we face it together," Lyra interrupted. "As a family." Ziri stood up from her energy chair and walked over to Marcus. Despite being the youngest, she had developed an uncanny ability to cut through complex problems with simple wisdom. "Brother, do you remember what you told us in the caves on Zirion Prime? When I was sick and scared? I promised to protect you." "Yes, but you also said something else. You said that children shouldn't pay for the crimes adults plan in their names. The ceremony tomorrow isn't about politics or treaties, it's about making sure that children from all species can grow up in a universe where their differences are celebrated instead of feared." Marcus knelt down to be at eye level with his youngest sister. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best teacher," she replied with a smile. "My big brother who chose to do the right thing even when it was hard." The next morning dawned clear and bright, with both suns casting rainbow patterns through the crystal architecture of the capital city. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Grand Assembly Hall, a space designed to accommodate the wildly different environmental needs of various alien physiologies. Marcus wore the formal robes of a Zarathi prince, but he had insisted on one modification. Embroidered across the chest in both human and Zarathi script were the words, "Family knows no species." The ceremony proceeded smoothly through the morning, with speech after speech about cooperation, understanding, and shared futures. Marcus was scheduled to speak just before the actual treaty signing, representing the unique perspective of a human who had found his place in alien society. As he approached the podium, Marcus could see the security forces positioned throughout the vast hall. Queen Vexara had taken no chances with his safety, but he also knew that determined terrorists could find ways around even the best protection. "Beings of many worlds," he began, his voice carried by translation systems to every corner of the assembly. "A year ago I was a simple human diplomat who thought he understood how the universe worked. I believed that loyalty meant blind obedience, that family was limited by biology, and that different species could never truly understand each other." He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, some recognizably humanoid, others so strange that human language lacked words to describe them. "I was wrong about everything. A year ago, 3 children were in danger, and helping them meant betraying everything I had been taught to believe. But sometimes, the greatest loyalty is disloyalty to systems that have forgotten their purpose. Sometimes the truest family are those who choose to love you, rather than those who share your genetics. And sometimes understanding comes not from similarity, but from the courage to embrace differences." Marcus felt his 3 sisters' presence through the empathic bond they shared, their emotional support flowing across the assembly hall like invisible light. "The treaty we signed today isn't just about trade agreements and territorial boundaries. It's about acknowledging a simple truth: there is no us and them in this universe. There is only us. We are all children of the same cosmos, shaped by the same stars, warmed by the same fundamental forces that make life possible." A movement in the upper galleries caught his attention. Security forces were converging on a section where several figures in dark clothing had been attempting to set up some kind of equipment. Marcus continued his speech without pause, trusting his family's protection. "Some of you know my story. How I chose 3 alien children over my own government's orders. How I was adopted into the Zarathi royal family. How I found my place among beings who shared my values rather than my DNA. That story isn't unique to me, it's a possibility for every being in this assembly." The disturbance in the galleries was over quickly and quietly. Marcus caught a slight nod from Queen Vexara, indicating that the threat had been neutralized. "We are here today because we believe in a future where species differences are sources of strength rather than conflict, where families can be chosen based on love and loyalty rather than accident of birth, where children can grow up believing that the universe is vast enough to hold all of our dreams." He concluded his speech to thunderous applause from dozens of different species, each expressing approval in their own way. As he walked back to his seat beside his family, Ziri took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Perfect speech, brother." The treaty signing proceeded without further incident, as representatives from 47 worlds added their marks to the historic document. Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. He had started as a failed diplomat and somehow become a bridge between civilizations. That evening, as the royal family celebrated in the palace's private quarters, Queen Vexara pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "The intelligence we received about terrorist threats was accurate but incomplete. The Human Purity Alliance wasn't planning to disrupt the ceremony." "What were they planning?"